Yo, what is up, everybody? Popo here, bringing you guys a new video, and today we're going to talk about how Urshifu ruined Regulation D. Let's go. Welcome, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about how Urshifu Rapid Strike, in particular, destroyed Regulation D. This Pokemon was an absolute menace when it was allowed, and a lot of people did not like it because of that. A lot of people did like Regulation C, which did add the Ruined Legendaries, and that regulation was a ton of fun, and we all had a good time in it. And then with Regulation D's announcement, sorry for the ads, there's so many ads on the site now. With the announcement of Regulation D and it being the World Championship format, everybody was very concerned about how strong Urshifu would be, and come to find out, that boy was strong. So we're going to talk about it a little bit here. I want to go through some of the usage stats that they have shown on here, and then we're going to look at the last Regulation C tournament and just see how different it was and how far the meta had come just for this one tournament. Because you got to remember, the last tournament for Regulation C was North American International Championships, and the next official event after that, besides I think Japan Nationals might have been after, but was the World Championship. So the Japan Nationals was also played on Regulation C, I believe, even though Regulation D was announced and being played at the time, potentially. I can't fully remember, but this is the first event that this was played on. So if we just go look down here and we really want to kind of see what's going on, we can just see a lot of Urshifu, right? So we're going all the way down to the top 10 teams all contained Urshifu Rapid Strike. And I don't believe any single one of these was single strike. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we can hover over it, actually. I don't know if you guys can see that. Does it show up? It does not. So, yeah, these are... Oh, we had a single strike at 7th. So, there was one in the top 8. There was 4th as well. But the rest of them were, in fact, Rapid Strike. So, there were 2, but still Urshifu dominating. And there's a good reason for that. Urshifu was very, very strong going into this meta. The power level of the meta itself was fairly low. We didn't have Ogerpon yet. We didn't have any of the new Paradox Mons or anything like that. So it was a very, very low power level in comparison to what it is now in Regulation F. But we see like a lot of Iron Hands as well, which is a Pokemon that has fallen off quite a bit. It was definitely a super used Pokemon, and one of the reasons for that, it was a good user of that Salt Vest. It was a good user of fighting type attacks against the ruined Pokemon. It sometimes forced your opponent to have to terrestrialize their Fluttermanes or their Chiyus just to get out of it. But what ends up happening is now we have this threat of this Urshifu Rapid Strike that is just allowing you to not care if they actually terrestrialize. They have to either have a Terra Water with a lot of bulk, or they're just going to faint. And that's what was happening with a lot of these Urshifus. And it just created a super, super, super toxic environment. We see this happening before Tornadus was really in use. As you could see, like, there were a couple of Tornadus up here with the Rapid Strike that kind of took over after the World Championships. But going into the World Championships, it was more of like a more balanced, as you can see here, more balanced version of that team now with that Urshifu Rapid Strike. You even had, you know, a Farigiraf in the finals, which was a precursor to what is happening now. But yeah, Rain wasn't as prevalent. But after this, Rain became huge. Teams more like this one here, a Duelist team, were way more common. But then you had teams like Victor's team, which became almost standard after this tournament going into the other regionals. So it kind of just took over Worlds. And you're going to ask, well, how much did it take over Worlds? Well, let's just scroll down a little bit because they do have the usage stats here, and we're gonna look at day one, right? Day one has Rapid Strike here at 38%. We see the Iron Hands at 41%, which is very respectable. It does do well into the Flutter Mane, which was at 71.7. There's no surprise there. Flutter Mane was the strongest Pokemon in the format, barring Rapid Strike's resurgence, and it's a Pokemon that could deal with Rapid Strike as well, and that put it in a really good position to be able to be a effective Pokemon in the meta. So, and you saw a lot of Amoonguss because Amoonguss was a pretty decent way to deal with the Rapid Strikes. But we could see right here the score of the Urshifu plus the Tornadus was really, really high on this list. And you see the Chien-Pao up here too because it gave your Urshifu more damage, but also gave you a way to deal with the Amoonguss. So a lot of people were vying for that Chien-Pao. We do see the Ursaluna. People thought this was going to be a really, really good Pokemon. History has shown that it hasn't. Ursaluna Blood Moon has outperformed regular Ursaluna, though Blood Moon did not exist yet. We had no idea it existed. Then you have the Goldango, which is a pretty interesting choice, and it did pretty well in this tournament, as you can see when we were looking at top teams. Chi-Yu going into this tournament was expected to do much better than it actually ended up doing. We'll look at the day twos in a second because it was so good in Regulation C. We had the Rillaboom, of course. He's really good into, you know, the Amoonguss and the Urshifu matchups as well. So that was a really good Pokemon. Our best fire type at the time was probably Heatran, so you saw a lot of usage on that. So you can kind of see where these Pokemon are coming from, right? But going into the day two stats, we see a whole different story when it comes to this Urshifu Rapid Strike, right? Going from 38%, going up 8% onto day two usage. Somehow, I don't know how this math worked out. It's kind of crazy. Flutter Mane staying at 71.7%. I don't know if that's correct or wrong or what, but that's crazy. Okay, that's crazy. A lot of these Pokemon actually staying in the spots that they were predicted, or, well, that were day one usage type stats, except we see the Chien-Pao moving up once again because the Chien-Pao is really good into that Amoonguss. We see percentages of these Pokemon actually increasing, though they, like, the Tornadus did decrease in overall ranking. That just shows how strong a team, including these, essentially these 6 Pokemon right here were like just really, really good. And you could throw Rillaboom into there if you wanted to instead of the Amoonguss to help deal with the Urshifu a little bit more. I am surprised that we see the Landorus increasing because I felt like the Landorus wasn't really good, and we see after this and even now to today that Landorus has continued to drop in usage just because there's so many threats up against it, and of course there is a better Intimidator going around. We don't talk about him, but yeah, you can see here the Chi-Yu actually drops significantly. It's the biggest decrease besides Ursaluna on this list. Most of the Pokemon went up, and we see that Single Strike actually comes into the top. So it just really shows how strong Urshifu was in this meta. It really, really, really nullified a ton of Pokemon. It made them completely useless. It made them unusable. One of those threats that really lost a lot of its gusto is gotta be that Gyarados. Before this, Gyarados was actually a pretty decent choice. We saw a lot of really good players choosing Gyarados on their teams and having success with it. So to see it just drop down to, you know, 11th place is still a good finish, but in a sea of Urshifus, it did not do very well. I'm going to be honest, this team right here is kind of crazy, and the fact that it didn't have any water type on it is wild to me, but it still performed pretty well. So credit to Yasuki. They did very, very well. And then Nick Navarre just bringing the wildest teams, and then Joe getting 19th with... Okay. Anyways, so we do see Alex Gomez also vying for that Gyarados. So there were still some Gyarados believers out there. Gyarados does have a really good matchup into the Urshifu because it can go for that Terrasilize flying and also gets to Intimidate off, and it resists both of the attacks that Urshifu is going for. So it does have a good matchup. We see here a single Dondozo in 26, which is also just crazy. And this is before the rise of the Arcanine, the Hisuian Arcanine that we saw later on, that could go into the Fairy Terra and take care of those Urshifus. But that wasn't really that wasn't a thing at all. And we see down here, just under all those Urshifus, we are seeing some more of the Believers of the Gyarados. Once again, Gyarados was really good going into Regulation D, but not so much in Regulation D. It was definitely outclassed. We see another solo Dondozo. So people bringing solo Dondozo is wild. Yeah, so and then there's another water type just sneaking in right there. So we do see a variety, but if you're just scrolling, you're just gonna see all these Urshifus, and most of them are going to be those Rapid Strikes. So Rapid Strike really showing. And now let's go look at the North American International Championship, right? This happened a couple of months prior to the World Championship. It happened in June at the beginning of July. So it was a whole different world back then. And we could see here, like, Solo Dondozo actually won this thing, but it had Ting Lu next to it, right? And we see Ting Lu here again. We see, Great Tusk. All of these Pokemon have been virtually destroyed and removed from the meta via one Pokemon. Because we can't say it was Fluttermane, because Fluttermane is still sitting here as the top used Pokemon. Of course, you can see Fluttermane all down here. Cheppa vying for a different strategy, not going for that Fluttermane. And you do see the Gyarados, right? We see a couple of Gyarados here, and we see a Palafin, another Pokemon absolutely nullified by Urshifu Rapid Strike, just showing how strong that Pokemon is. We also see the drop of Arcanine from the World Championships, as he has no matchup into Urshifu Rapid Strike, so he was not able to compete with it without a better, typing or a better Terra type, and then you're using your Terra on there rather than one of the other threats that you really want to be using against. So teams like this just completely nullified. These teams completely nullified because it just had really good matchup into like 3 Pokemon on this team. I would even say 4. Even with the Sun, it still does massive damage to these Pokemon with close combats and such. So it just completely removed those from the meta. We did still see Chien-Pao Dragonite stuff going on, so that didn't really change until more recently, when there's been a lot more hate on those. Justin Knox making it with the with the Iron Moth is crazy. We still see a little bit of the Mouse Ape stuff, but like Dondozo has dropped a lot since it has dropped too, because it just, a lot of the same counters counter it, and also it does really good into those. Forcing a Terra onto Dondozo that's not grass really slows down Dondozo against those Urshifu sets. But yeah, you could just really see it. There's a lot of Pokemon here, a lot of Steel types, a lot of Dark types that just aren't used after the release of Urshifu, because he just nullifies all of them. Meowscarada is another one. It is a Pokemon that can counter something like that Urshifu, but it is just so frail and so weak that it's unable to do so in an effective manner. So it just lost all of his usage. And to be honest, it lost a lot of its usage going into Regulation C, because Fluttermane was so prevalent with all the new Dark types, and Chi-Yu being a Pokemon that was very scary. We see Wolf Glick's team. If you don't remember this team, this was Parrish Dondozo. This was a really, really cool team. An early believer of the Gyarados was Wolf Glick. But yeah, we could see the Gyarados. There's a lot of Dondozo Gyarados stuff going on. So these are just Pokemon that just lost all usage. This Guillermo brought Rotom Wash. Respect for that. Yeah, just like Tyranitar is another one, right? There was some Tyranitar usage going into Regulation C, more in Regulation B, because there's so many Darks brought out that you kind of had to pick which Dark Pokemon you want on your team, and this one kind of dropped out of the favoritism for that. And yeah, it nullifies that, though he is coming back, because he's pretty decent against the Dark one. If you have the Fairy Terra or Flying Terra or something, you can definitely deal with that. But yeah, Grey Tusk is dead after the release of Urshifu, because it just gets knocked out by Urshifu easy. It like doesn't even hesitate. We don't even see Talonflames anymore. Talonflames just became nullified with the release of Tornadus, but also because of the release of those Urshifus going water type, and then just be able to take out the Talonflames, even if they Terra, essentially, is just not good look for it. For a while, we actually lost Glamora to the meta because it was just stopped by the Urshifus. It just couldn't really do anything. It was slower. It just really wasn't putting up anything. So we saw the drop of that. We don't even see any Azumarill anymore because they just get destroyed by it. So as you could see, as the further and further we go down this list, you could see that a lot of these Pokemon were absolutely just destroyed by the Urshifu. And let's look at these usage stats over here, right? So in the top 8, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Pokemon that carried over into the next regulation. Of course, this was the next tournament of the regulation, so it's kind of hard to say how many of those continue throughout the whole format. Water Terra was the #1 Terra. Now we're seeing more of Fairy Terra being the #1 Terra. Going into these newer formats, we saw safety goggles everywhere because of this. Assault Vest now is #1, and then I think Focus Sash is #2. Focus Sash was #6 at the time, so not a huge usage on that. And yeah, we can see Flare Mane 73%. Flare Mane continued to be the dominant force until we saw Ogerpon, and that's kind of where the Urshifu train kind of stopped, right? Was the release of such a good Pokemon, and that good Pokemon being Ogerpon. Wellspring most specifically, but Ogerpon in general. Just having 4 different Pokemon, essentially 4 different Pokemon that can hit this one Pokemon for super effective without it having a weird or interesting Terra was really strong against it, and that's why we saw the rise of the Dark one, because it could deal with those Ogerpon Wellsprings, which have Water Absorb, of course, and Follow Me, which completely shuts down something like that Urshifu Rapid Strike. So now there are some counters for it, but when Regulation D dropped, this Pokemon was absolutely insane, and you could see that just from the amount of people who brought it to the World Championship, the amount of people who topped with it in the World Championship. We saw Urshifu in the top 8 of the World Championship. There were 2 single strikes, but Urshifu in general, being able to hit through Protect is just crazy. It's so strong, and it can't be overlooked, except Mighty Cleave. But yeah, anyways, guys, this is how strong Urshifu was. And if you guys did enjoy this video and you're not subscribed, make sure you do so. Thumbs up if you liked it. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.